Kansas Territory, winter of 1874. Clara Monroe stumbled through the snow outside Bitter Creek after the auction house threw her out like broken freight, shackles still fresh on her skin. Behind her, a group of drunken men followed with that hungry, lawless sound every woman learns to fear. She tripped, fell hard against the frozen ground, and heard boots crunch closer. Too close. Too eager. Her breath shook as she whispered to herself, "Lord, please, not like this. Not again." What happens next will decide whether she lives or disappears the way so many women did on this frontier. Before we continue, if you're watching this from anywhere in the world, leave your city name in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. The chain had barely fallen from her wrists when the cold swallowed her whole. Clara Monroe stepped off the auction block like someone waking from a nightmare she wasn't sure had ended. Men laughed behind her, boots scraping in the dirt, coins jingling as if she were still being bid on. "Look at her run," one man slurred. "She won't get far. Girl like that never does." Clara didn't look back. She couldn't. Her legs trembled, her breath sharp and uneven. The air of Bitter Creek was colder than any winter she'd known, and the night held no kindness for someone like her. Bought, unbought, and still owned in the eyes of every stranger on that muddy street. Her dress, thin and torn from handling, snapped against her knees. She wrapped her arms around herself, but the cold pushed through her like needles. She tried the saloon door, locked. She tried the boarding house, slammed shut before she'd gotten a full sentence out. No one wanted trouble. A girl like her was trouble. A girl like her was less than that. When she reached the end of Main Street, her strength faltered. She pressed a hand to a wooden post, sucking in air that made her chest burn. She didn't know where to go, didn't even know what direction was safe. Bitter Creek stretched out like a promise she had no claim to. Lamps glowing behind windows she would never belong to. Darkness thickened around her, broken only by the faintest trail in the snow. Deep, heavy boot prints and the line of a horse's hooves. She recognized them. She didn't know why. Malachi Reed's boots. The quiet man who'd bought her without a word, only to unshackle her and walk away. She remembered the sound of the lock clicking open, the weight lifting from her wrists. His voice calm, low, as if speaking too loud might break her into pieces. "You're free now. Free." The words still rang hollow inside her. Clara followed his tracks because they were the only thing in Bitter Creek that hadn't pushed her away. The wind bit at her cheeks until they went numb. Somewhere behind her, a door creaked and a drunken voice called out, "Hey, girl, you best come back 'fore someone worse finds you." She didn't turn. If someone worse existed, she'd already met half of them. The snow deepened. The town lights dimmed behind her. Every step felt heavier, like the night was trying to pull her down, drag her into the cold until she stopped moving altogether. Her vision blurred. Her knees buckled. She caught herself once, twice, then sank against a fence post that seemed to rise from nowhere. A sign hung above her, swinging in the wind. "Reed Hollow Ranch." Clara stared at the letters as the realization hit her. Not slow and gentle, but sharp, cutting through the fog in her mind. She'd walked all this way to the man who didn't want anything from her, who didn't ask for thanks, who didn't even ask her name. Maybe this was foolish. Maybe he'd tell her to leave like all the others. Maybe he'd slam the door in her face. But her legs gave out before she could weigh those fears. She collapsed at the gate. For a moment, she lay still in the snow, the cold sinking into her bones, her breath shallow, her eyes half shut. Everything inside her whispered, "Just rest. Just let it end here." She didn't know how long she stayed like that, seconds or hours. The storm of her thoughts made time meaningless. Then, a thud. Bootsteps in the snow. A low voice, startled but steady. "Miss?" She blinked. The world wavered in and out until a shape came into focus. A tall figure wrapped in a thick coat, shoulders wide, posture sharp with concern he didn't know how to show. Malachi Reed. His eyes softened the moment he recognized her. Not with pity, not with annoyance. Just something steady, something human. "What are you doing out here?" he murmured, his voice rough in a way that felt like a blanket, not a threat. Clara opened her mouth, but no words came. Only a raw, shaking breath. Malachi knelt beside her, gloved hands hovering an inch from her shoulders, unsure if touching her would frighten her more. "You're freezing," he said softly. "Come on now." In one sure motion, he lifted her, light as a feather, fragile as shattered glass. Her head dropped against his chest. She felt the warmth of him, the steadiness of his breathing, the strength in the arms carrying her inside. "Don't worry," he said quietly, almost to himself. "I ain't taking nothing from you. Ain't expecting nothing either." He pushed the door open with his shoulder. Warmth flooded over her like salvation. Inside the ranch house, light flickered from the hearth, painting gold across rough-hewn walls. Josie, the young girl Clara had glimpsed earlier, peeked from behind a doorway, eyes wide. "You found her," Josie whispered. Malachi didn't answer. He lowered Clara gently onto a chair near the fire. Her fingers curled toward the heat on instinct. "Stay still," he said softly. "You're safe here. Just breathe." Clara swallowed hard. Tears she hadn't allowed herself finally burned at the corners of her eyes. Safe. Was it really possible? Her throat tightened as she whispered the only words she could manage. "Thank you." Malachi looked away, almost uncomfortable with her gratitude. "You don't owe me a thing," he said. "Not then. Not now." For the first time in years, Clara believed someone. And for the first time in years, she let herself hope. Warmth stung more than cold. Clara Monroe had barely settled into the chair before the heat from the fire reached her fingers, waking nerves that had gone numb long before she'd arrived at Reed Hollow Ranch. Her breath hitched. half relief, half pain. Malachi Reed stood a few steps away, tall and quiet like the kind of man who'd spent years learning not to scare anyone. His broad shoulders filled the doorway as he hung his coat on a nail by the door. Snow dusted his hair and beard, melting slowly into dark streaks along his jaw. "You need food," he said, voice low, "and rest." He hesitated. "Mostly rest." Her lips parted to answer, but her voice had no strength yet. Before either could move, tiny footsteps padded across the wooden floor. Josie, small, quick, dark curls framing her face, held a wooden bowl in both hands. Steam curled from its rim. "I warmed it," she whispered, as if afraid Clara might break if spoken to too loudly. "It's good. Honest." Clara tried to smile. It trembled, but it was real. "Thank you." The girl's eyes softened with something Clara hadn't seen all day. Kindness untouched by cruelty. Malachi cleared his throat, gently steering Josie aside. "Go on now. Let her eat first." But Josie didn't move far. She lingered like someone who'd learned to watch carefully, afraid to miss any sign of danger. Clara lifted the spoon with shaky fingers. The soup wasn't fancy, just broth, onions, maybe a scrap of chicken, but it tasted like a promise her body had forgotten existed. Warmth spread from her chest outward. She felt eyes on her and looked up to find Malachi leaning back against the table, arms crossed. Not judgmental, not hungry, just studying her condition the way a man studied weather rolling in from the ridge. Finally, he spoke. "I'm not taking you back to that auction," he said. "Figured you needed to hear that straight." Her breath caught. "Why? Why did you free me?" For a moment, the fire crackled loudly between them. Malachi shifted his weight, gaze fixed somewhere near the floorboards. "Didn't sit right with me, seeing you chained like that. Nothing about it did." Clara held his eyes. Most men there didn't seem bothered. "I ain't most men." He said it without pride, almost like an apology. She nodded slowly, letting the truth settle in her bones. He wasn't trying to impress her. He wasn't trying to soften her. He was simply stating a fact. When she'd finished the last spoonful, Malachi stepped forward and draped a blanket over her shoulders. He didn't touch her skin, only the fabric, but even that small gesture nearly undid her. "You can stay tonight," he said. "Storm's picking up. Roads'll be worse by morning." She hesitated. "I don't want to cause trouble." A muscle in his jaw twitched. "Trouble found you long before this ranch." It was the closest thing to comfort she'd heard in years. Josie edged closer. "You hurt?" Clara shook her head. "Just cold and tired." Josie's gaze flicked to Malachi. "She can sleep in Mama's room." Clara froze. Malachi's expression flickered, pain, quick and deep, before he masked it. "We'll talk about that later, Joe." The girl backed up, crestfallen. "I didn't mean... I just thought..." "It's all right." Malachi tugged her gently toward the hallway. "Go check the kettle." When Josie disappeared behind the curtain, Clara whispered, "I didn't know you had a wife." "I don't." The answer was clipped, final. "She passed, long time ago." The silence afterward wasn't awkward. It carried weight, an understanding between two people who both knew loss intimately but didn't speak of it. Malachi rubbed a hand over the back of his neck. "Look, you're safe here. Tonight, at least. I'll make a place for you to sleep. Got a spare cot." "You don't have to." "I know I don't." His eyes lifted to hers, steady and serious. "I'm doing it anyway." The blanket around her shoulders tightened, as if offering its own reassurance. Clara swallowed hard. "Why?" she asked again, softer this time. Malachi drew in a breath. The firelight traced the hard lines of his face, the quiet storms hidden behind them. "Because no one helped me once," he said, "back when I needed it most. And I told myself, if I ever got the chance to be different, I would be." Her heart thudded in her chest. There it was, an answer simple but truer than anything she'd heard in years. He wasn't a hero, he wasn't rescuing her for reward. He'd just chosen not to be like the men who'd failed him. Clara felt something crack open inside her, a small, trembling space where hope could fit. Then, as her gaze traveled over him, another realization struck her. The dark, warm tone of his skin in the firelight. The subtle stiffness of men in town earlier. The whispered slurs she'd heard thrown behind his back. "You're," she swallowed, "you're a black rancher." Malachi didn't flinch, didn't apologize, didn't explain. "Last I checked," he said quietly. Clara's chest tightened, not in fear but understanding. He'd freed her in a world where people barely let him be free himself. "I'm sorry," she whispered, "for what folks say, for what I didn't see." He shook his head. "Ain't your burden." Josie's voice called from behind the curtain. "Kettle's boiling, Uncle Mal." Malachi nodded toward the hallway. "Rest now. You're safe. That's enough for one night." Clara pulled the blanket closer. For the first time since the auction, warmth touched something deeper than her skin. Maybe safety wasn't permanent. Maybe trust wasn't simple. But this room, this fire, these two people, felt like the first step toward something she'd never dared to imagine. A place she might belong, even if only for tonight. Morning came slow to Reed Hollow Ranch, spilling pale light across wooden floors and the quiet hush of a house not used to strangers. Clara Monroe woke to warmth she didn't trust yet. A blanket pulled up to her chin, the scent of firewood still clinging to her hair, and the faint clatter of dishes from the kitchen. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then memory came flooding back. Snow, collapse. Malachi's arms lifting her. Josie's shy eyes. She pushed herself upright. Every muscle ached, but it was a familiar ache. Life, not danger. When she stepped into the kitchen, Josie nearly jumped with excitement. "You're up," the girl beamed, holding a tin cup in both hands. Uncle Mal made coffee. It's strong, real strong. Malachi, standing at the stove, muttered, "She don't need to warn you. The smell does it." Clara smiled despite herself. "Smells better than anything I've had in a long time." His back was to her, but she could see his shoulders stiffen, as if compliments were something he didn't know where to place. He poured coffee into a cup, slid it toward her without looking up. "Drink slow," he said. "You ain't used to it." Clara wrapped her hands around the warm tin. "Thank you." He only nodded. Josie tugged at Clara's sleeve. "Want to see the horses? We got 2 good ones. And a mule, but she's mean." Malachi shot the girl a warning look. "Let her finish her coffee first." Clara sipped carefully, letting the heat settle her nerves. There was something about this place. Rough, quiet, worn around the edges, that felt safer than anywhere she'd been in years. Too safe, maybe. Safe enough to scare her. "I can help," she said suddenly. It surprised even her. Both Malachi and Josie turned. "You don't need to do nothing," Malachi said quickly. "I do," Clara insisted, softer but firm. I can't sit here like a burden." Her voice cracked at that word. Burden. The thing she'd been called more than once. The thing every man who'd laid claim to her had thrown at her. Malachi's expression shifted, barely, but she saw it. Something like understanding. "You ain't a burden," he said, quiet as dust settling. "Not here." Josie nodded fiercely, as if she could make it true by sheer willpower. Clara let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. "Still, I want to help, please." Malachi hesitated, then gestured toward the back door. "All right. Come on then. We'll start with something easy." Outside, the cold bit her cheeks, but the sun softened it. The barn sat a few yards from the house, its doors pushed open just enough to let warm light pool inside. Horses shifted and snorted softly as they approached. Josie hurried ahead. "This one's Glory. He's old, but he's sweet. And this here's Whitfoot. Don't stand too close, he nips." Clara laughed. A small, startled laugh she hadn't expected from herself. I'll remember that." Malachi handed her a brush. "Just smooth downward. Calm and steady. Horses feel what you feel." Clara touched Glory's flank, the warmth of the animal grounding her. She brushed slow strokes. At first her hands trembled, but the horse didn't flinch. Just breathed deep, as if reminding her she could too. Josie leaned on the stall door. "You're good at that." "I used to help a woman who took care of travelers' horses," Clara said quietly. "Before things changed." Malachi's brush paused mid-air. Not by much, just long enough for Clara to notice. He never asked what changed. Never pried. It somehow made her feel safer. When chores were done, Josie skipped ahead toward the house, calling for lunch. Clara followed slowly, warmth building behind her ribs, something unfamiliar yet precious. Malachi walked beside her, silent stretching but never suffocating. "You worked hard," he said. "You didn't need to." "I wanted to," Clara answered. Her breath fogged in the air. She gathered her nerve. And thank you for giving me space, not pushing questions. He shrugged. Ain't my business unless you want it to be. No one's ever said that to me before. He stopped walking. Clara took 2 more steps before she realized he wasn't beside her anymore. She turned. Malachi was watching her with that steady, unreadable gaze of his, the kind that felt like it saw more than it should. That auction, what they did to you. He shook his head slowly. You're owed silence if that's what you need, or a voice if you want one. Clara swallowed hard. And you? What about me? What do you need? The question stunned him. He blinked once, twice, as if no one had asked him that in years either. To keep this place runnin', he said finally. Need to keep Josie fed. Need, his voice thinned. Need things to stay quiet a while. Clara nodded. I can do quiet. He gave her a look, soft, almost warm. Yeah, he murmured. I figured you could. Josie's voice broke the moment. Lunch! Malachi turned toward the house. Clara followed, steps lighter than when she'd arrived last night. Inside, the table was already set with cornbread and stew. Josie talked through mouthfuls. Malachi muttered for her to chew slower. Clara laughed at both of them. And for a few fleeting minutes, she wasn't cold or hunted or lost. For a few fleeting minutes, she belonged to something. Maybe just a beginning. Maybe just a borrowed afternoon. But for Clara Monroe, who'd had nothing for so long, it felt like home trying to remember her name. By the 4th morning at Reed Hollow Ranch, Clara Monroe felt steady on her feet again. Not healed, heavens no, but strong enough to stand beside Malachi as he hitched the wagon. The air bit with late winter sharpness, but the sky was clear. It should have been a simple trip into town. Sell a few cattle, buy flour, maybe thread for Josie's dresses. Should have been. But Clara had already learned Bitter Creek didn't believe in simple. Stay close, Malachi said, as he handed her a coat Josie had insisted she wear. His voice was calm, but there was something beneath it. A warning, not unkind. Town ain't gentle on strangers, less gentle on folks ridin' with me. Clara's chest tightened. She wasn't naive. She'd seen the looks directed at him. She'd seen worse directed at herself. Still, she nodded. I won't wander, she promised. Malachi's eyes softened a fraction. Didn't say that for my sake. They loaded the last crate and headed toward Bitter Creek, Josie waving from the porch until the wagon dipped out of sight. Town was louder today. Cowboys arguing over poker debt, boots stomping across frozen mud, wagon wheels creaking. But the moment Malachi rode in, conversation faltered. Heads turned. A few mouths curled into smirks. Clara straightened her spine. Malachi stepped down first and offered her a hand. She took it, not because she needed help, but because she wanted to show it she wasn't ashamed to be seen beside him. That alone drew a few frowns. They walked toward the general store. Malachi's jaw stayed tight, eyes forward. Clara matched his pace. Inside, the warmth smelled of flour, leather, and stacked wood. The storekeeper, a broad man with thinning hair, paused mid-counting. "Oh," he said, not friendly, not surprised. More like someone stepping around something on the road. "Read." Malachi gave a curt nod. "Need flour, beans, nails." The man didn't write the order. His gaze slid to Clara, slowly, rudely. "And she's with you?" Clara felt the familiar sting, being assessed, weighed, judged, as if her worth were a list someone else decided. Malachi didn't flinch. "She is," the storekeeper muttered. "Well, you know how folks talk." "Let 'em," Malachi said. But Clara saw the flicker in his expression, the one that said he wasn't worried for himself. He didn't want her hurt. "Is it a problem?" Clara asked, stepping forward. The man scoffed. "Lady, maybe you don't know much about this town, but folks here don't take kindly to—" His eyes flicked to Malachi. "Associations." Clara's heart thumped hard. Anger rose, hot and clean, surprising her with its strength. "Associations," she echoed. "You mean a decent man shopping for supplies?" The storekeeper's mouth pressed thin. "You'd do well to mind your tone." "And you'd do well to mind your manners," she said, louder than intended. Silence spilled across the aisles like knocked-over grain. Malachi touched her elbow gently. "Clara, let it go." But she shook her head. "No, I won't." Her voice trembled, not from fear, but from years of being spoken over, dismissed, treated like something less. "For the first time in a long time," she continued, "someone treated me like a human being. If that offends this town, then this town can choke on its opinions." The storekeeper's eyes widened. "You best watch yourself. Bitter Creek remembers mouths that don't know when to shut." Before Clara could fire back, a heavy boot step echoed behind her. "Well, well," a voice drawled. "Reed's brought himself company." Sheriff Whitlow, badge shining, smile poisonous. Behind him stood Elias Crowell, hands in his coat pockets, smirk sharp as a blade. "Thought you kept to yourself nowadays," Whitlow said to Malachi. "Seems you've been busy." Crowell tilted his head. "Quite a picture. A runaway stray, and the man who bought her freedom." His eyes landed on Clara, traveling slow enough to make her skin crawl. "Tell me, sweetheart, he treatin' you better than the auction house would've?" Before Malachi could step between them, Clara did. "You don't get to speak to me," she said, voice cold. Crowell raised a brow. "Look at that, Reed. Your little dove's got claws." Malachi stepped forward, towering over Crowell. His voice, when it came, was deadly quiet. "You're done." Crowell shrugged, just making conversation. Whitlow smirked, tapping his badge. "We're keepers of the peace around here. You'd know that, Reed. Better than most." At that, Malachi tensed. Clara noticed the way his breath stilled, the subtle twitch in his jaw, a hint of something she didn't yet understand. Whitlow's eyes gleamed with cruel amusement. "Town don't forget a man's past." Crowell leaned in, whispering just loud enough. Some folks remember it real well. Clara felt the air shift, a crack in the facade. Something unseen pulling at Malachi, tightening around him like a noose. Without thinking, she stepped closer to him, standing shoulder to shoulder. "If you're done harassing us," she said sharply, "we'd like to finish our business." Whitlow's smile vanished. "Watch yourself, girl." "I already am," Clara replied. Malachi placed a steadying hand near her back, not touching, just there. "We're leaving," he said. They walked out together. Behind them, laughter followed like smoke. But Clara didn't bow her head. She lifted her chin higher. Outside, Malachi exhaled long and slow. "You didn't need to speak up for me." "Yes," Clara said, her voice steady. "I did." Malachi turned to her. "I don't want you getting dragged into—" "I'm already in it," Clara said gently. "You freed me. The least I can do is walk beside you." For a long moment, Malachi looked at her with something quiet and raw, something like gratitude he didn't know how to give voice to. Finally, he nodded. "All right then," he said. "Beside me." And for the first time that morning, Clara felt the cold lift just enough for hope to slip through. Reed Hollow Ranch settled into a slow, steady rhythm after the trip to town. Chores at dawn, stew simmering by noon, Josie humming little songs she made up on the spot. It should have felt peaceful. It did. Mostly. But Clara Monroe could feel something else beneath the surface. An undercurrent running through the house like a creek hidden under ice. Malachi Reed kept busy, too busy, fixing harnesses that weren't broken, restacking firewood that hadn't fallen. He avoided her eyes more than usual, especially after what happened in Bitter Creek. Clara had stood up for him. She didn't regret it. But it had shaken something loose in him. Pride, guilt, fear. She couldn't tell. All she knew was that he was holding something close. Too close. And today, for the first time since arriving, she was alone in the house. Malachi and Josie had ridden out to mend a fence near the West Ridge. Clara stayed behind to catch up on chores, sweeping, washing mugs, folding blankets. She liked the motions. They kept her hands busy and her thoughts quieter. But when she reached Malachi's small office, really just a table, a lamp, and a drawer, her steps slowed. She shouldn't go in. She knew that. Yet the door was cracked open, just slightly. A draft creaked the hinges. Dust motes floated in a golden shaft of light. Clara hesitated only a moment before stepping inside. She told herself she was only cleaning, dusting, helping, earning her keep. But the truth sat heavy in her chest. She wanted to understand him, just a little, just enough to make the way he looked at the sheriff make sense. Her hand skimmed the table, moving a few scattered papers, feed receipts, notes about winter stores, a sketch Josie had drawn of a horse that looked more like a cloud. Clara smiled. Then her fingers brushed something harder, a metal key. It lay half hidden beneath a torn envelope. Her heart thudded. The key matched the lock on the drawer beneath the table. She shouldn't. She really shouldn't. But the moment she realized the drawer was slightly ajar, barely an inch, her breath caught. Malachi hadn't closed it fully. Maybe he'd forgotten. Maybe he wanted it found. No, that wasn't Malachi. He hid things for a living, even from himself. Clara hesitated only a few seconds before the ache of curiosity pushed her forward. She slid the drawer open. Inside lay 3 items neatly stacked: a folded leather notebook, a packet of old papers tied with twine, a metal badge, sheriff's deputy badge, tarnished, scratched, long unused. Clara froze. A deputy? Malachi? It didn't match the man she knew, not the one who avoided the law like a wounded animal. Her hands shook as she picked up the leather notebook. The cover was worn, edges soft from use. When she opened it, the pages smelled faintly of smoke and years gone by. Names filled the first few entries. Dates, locations, tracks cited, routes taken, groups intercepted. Her vision blurred. She flipped to the middle. There. A name she recognized. Coleman Train Line. Intercepted near the ridge, suspects located. Caravan of 6. Brought back by Whitlow's order. Her throat tightened painfully. Caravan of 6 wasn't precise, but she knew. She knew. She had been taken with a caravan, sold off, separated, lost. One of the names listed beneath the entry belonged to a woman Clara remembered, the woman who'd tried to protect her, the only one who'd held her hand and whispered, "Run when you get a chance." That woman had never made it. Clara pressed a hand to her mouth as a strangled sound escaped her. She shut the notebook quickly, as if closing it could undo what she'd read. Her legs felt weak. Malachi had been part of it? No, there had to be more. There had to be a reason, one that wasn't monstrous or cruel. She'd seen his eyes. They held storms, yes, but not the kind that enjoyed hurting people. Still, the truth didn't care about her hopes. The truth sat in that drawer. Her heartbeat pounded through her ribs. She placed everything back exactly as she'd found it. She wiped her palms on her skirt, then on her apron, then on nothing, because the shaking wouldn't stop. A sound outside startled her, a horse's distant whinny, followed by Josie's laughter drifting toward the house. They were coming back. Clara stepped away from the drawer as if it had burned her. She forced her hands to still, forced breath into her lungs, forced her face into something that might pass as normal. The door creaked. Josie burst in, cheeks rosy. "We fixed the fence." "Well, Uncle Mal did. I just watched." Clara smiled automatically. Malachi followed behind, tall and quiet as ever. He glanced at Clara, just a flick of his eyes, and she felt it like a weight. Had he sensed something? Did he know? Her voice barely held. "Welcome back." Malachi paused. His brow furrowed a fraction. "You all right?" Clara swallowed hard. "Yes," she lied. "Just tired." He studied her longer than she wanted him to. Then he nodded slowly. "All right." But Clara knew he didn't believe her. and she knew with a sinking ache in her chest that this was only the beginning. The questions, the doubt, the fear that the man who'd saved her had once been part of the machine that destroyed so many others. Her hands pressed against her apron, steadying herself. She wasn't ready to ask him. Not yet. But she also knew she would not rest until she did. The afternoon sun hung low over Reed Hollow Ranch, painting everything in a soft, forgiving gold. It should have been peaceful. Josie humming while snapping beans, Malachi oiling the saddle near the barn, Clara kneading dough in the kitchen. And yet, everything inside Clara churned. Ever since she'd opened that drawer, her heart had been a tight, unsteady knot. Every time Malachi spoke, every time he walked past her, every time he looked at her with those steady, unreadable eyes, she felt the question burning under her ribs. What did you do, and why didn't you tell me? She wasn't ready to ask. She wasn't ready to hear. But the distance between them had changed. Subtle, but sharp as a splinter. Malachi felt it. She knew he did. And that was before trouble arrived. The knock at the door wasn't a knock at all, more like someone asserting ownership. Heavy, impolite, confident. Clara's heart stuttered. Malachi looked up from outside, eyes narrowing. He wiped the oil from his hands and walked toward the house, shoulders going rigid. Josie froze mid-step. "Uncle Mal?" "Inside," Malachi said quietly. Not sharp, but firm. Clara wiped her hands, forcing air into her lungs as the knock came again. Malachi reached the door just as the third bang echoed through the house. He opened it, but only part way. Elias Crowell stood there, tall and clean-pressed, wearing the type of smile a wolf wore before it lunged. His hat was tilted at an angle too casual to be honest. "Well now," Crowell drawled, "I thought you'd offer a man a warmer welcome than that, Reed." Malachi didn't move. "State your business." Crowell clicked his tongue. "Always straight to it. Shame. I came to say hello." His gaze slid past Malachi, landing squarely on Clara like a snake finding a mouse. "Well, ain't this something? Little bird from the auction house looking right at home." Clara's stomach dropped. She forced herself to stand straighter. Malachi stepped fully in front of her. "She's under my protection. That's all you need to know." Crowell raised his eyebrows. "Protection? Is that what we're calling it?" He leaned a shoulder against the doorframe. "Funny thing, Reed. A man with a past like yours talking about protection." Clara felt her pulse spike. Her hands clenched at her sides. Malachi's voice lowered. "You should leave." Crowell smirked. "Oh, I will. Just thought your lady here ought to know who she's nestin' with." He turned slightly toward Clara, his smile sharpened to a blade. "Tell me, sweetheart, has he mentioned who he used to work for?" Clara's mouth went dry. Malachi's jaw locked. "Elias," Crowell held up a hand. "No need to jump. I ain't tellin' tales. Just reminiscing." He tapped the edge of the doorframe. Reed was the best tracker we ever had. Man could follow footprints on stone. The world swayed for a beat. Tracker. The notebook. The badge. The caravan. Clara's throat tightened painfully. Crowell let the silence stretch. Course. Folks don't change much. You break a horse, it stays broke. Malachi stepped forward, blocking the man's view entirely. Get off my land. Crowell's grin widened. There he is, the man I remember. He tipped his hat, not respectfully, but mockingly. You ought to tell her the rest before someone else does. Before Malachi could respond, Crowell walked away, boots crunching over gravel like a warning fading into the wind. The silence left behind felt thick enough to choke on. For a long moment, no one spoke. Not Josie peeking from the kitchen curtain, not Clara gripping her apron, not Malachi whose chest rose and fell in tight, controlled breaths. Clara finally found her voice. Barely. What was he talking about? Malachi didn't answer immediately. He closed the door slowly, then leaned both hands on the table, head bowed. The muscles in his back tightened beneath his shirt. Clara, he said quietly, you don't need to worry about Crowell. That's not what I asked. Her tone wasn't sharp, but it cut anyway. Malachi stiffened. I told you before, he said, still not turning around. My past ain't something you need tangled in. But I already am tangled in it. Her voice wavered. You know that. He finally looked at her. There was something bruised in his eyes. Old pain, older guilt. I'll tell you what matters, he said, slow and careful. You're safe here. Josie's safe here. That's all I care about. But why am I safe here? Clara whispered. Because you feel responsible. Because of something you did? His jaw tightened. His silence was answer enough. Clara stepped back. Only an inch. But she felt it like a gulf opening. You're not telling me something. Something big. Malachi swallowed hard. It ain't time yet. Her breath hitched. Not time. Malachi, people are coming to your door hinting at your past. You don't think I deserve to know what's coming? He opened his mouth, then closed it. That hurt more than any answer he could have given. Clara's voice cracked. Just tell me one thing. One honest thing. Her hands trembled. Were you part of what happened to people like me? Malachi flinched. Not visibly, but she felt it from across the room. I did things I ain't proud of, he said quietly. But not for the reasons Crowell wants you to think. Clara's breath came unsteady. That's not an answer. No, he admitted. It ain't. Josie's small voice broke the silence. Uncle Mal? He turned away. Go inside, Joe. Clara's heart twisted. The walls of Reed Hollow Ranch were suddenly too tight, too small to hold the weight of what she'd seen in that drawer, heard at that door, felt between them. I need air, Clara whispered. She walked past him, pushing out the back door, before he could stop her. Malachi stood in the doorway, watching her go, looking like a man being pulled apart by something he couldn't put into words. And Clara knew this was only the beginning of the fracture, not broken yet, but cracking. The wind had turned sharp by sunset, carrying the cold straight across the open pasture. Clara walked until her legs ached, until the ache in her chest threatened to spill over. She stopped only when the sky bruised purple and the first stars blinked awake. Behind her, the creak of boots on frost-hardened dirt finally came. "Clara." Malachi's voice was low, rough, careful, as if afraid one wrong tone would shatter her. She didn't turn. "You shouldn't follow me." "Maybe not." His steps slowed. "But I did." A long silence. Clara's breath clouded the air in front of her, thin and uneven. "Say what you came to say," she murmured. He exhaled, tired, defeated. "I reckon you deserve some truth." She turned then, facing him in the dying light. "Some?" Her voice cracked. "Malachi, I need all of it." His jaw tightened. "I can't give all of it." That single sentence hit harder than a slap. Clara wrapped her arms around herself, trying to hold something inside before it spilled out. "Why not? Am I not trusted enough? Not strong enough? Or just temporary?" Malachi flinched. For a man who rarely showed emotion, it was like watching a structure tilt under too much weight. "You ain't temporary," he said quietly. "You never were." "Then tell me." He stepped closer, hands curled at his sides. "I used to run with Whitlow and Crowell's men. I was a tracker." "I know," she whispered. "I saw the notebook." He exhaled sharply, like the words cut him. "I did it to protect Josie. She was just a baby then. Her ma, my sister, she died running from those same men. I had to buy us time, had to keep us alive." Clara's throat tightened. "You worked for them to keep her safe." "Yes." His eyes flickered with something raw, fear or shame or both. "I led their searches, their hunts, but not for coin, not for loyalty, for Joe, always for her." Clara looked away as tears stung her eyes. "That doesn't erase what was done to us. To me." Malachi shook his head. "I know it don't. I know it never will." She swallowed hard. "Were you there when my caravan was taken?" Malachi's breath stalled. He didn't answer immediately, and that was an answer. A small, broken sound left her throat. "Oh, God." "I didn't know you were there," he said quickly, desperately. "I wasn't told who was in the wagons. I just followed orders far enough to keep suspicion off me and Joe. I never laid hands on nobody." Clara's tears blurred him. "But you helped." "I did," he whispered, "and I regret it every day I breathe." She stepped backward as if burned. "Why didn't you tell me? Why wait until Crowell cornered you on your own porch? Were you ever going to say anything?" "I didn't want to lose this." He motioned between them helplessly. Didn't want to lose the good that's finally coming around. Clara shook her head, slowly, heartbreak twisting her voice. Malachi, you didn't give me a choice. You chose what I could know, what I could feel. He took one step, then stopped when she stiffened. You kept me in the dark like some fragile thing, she said, voice shaking. But I'm not fragile. I just needed honesty. I needed you honest. Malachi swallowed. Clara, no. She held up a trembling hand. I can't stay here tonight. Not with half-truths. Not with ghosts between us. A flicker of panic crossed his face. Real, unguarded. It ain't safe for you out there. I survived worse than the dark. Her voice broke. What I can't survive is being lied to by the one man I thought saw me as a person. He stared at her like a man watching something precious slip through his fingers and not knowing how to stop it. Then he said the one sentence that shattered her. If you leave, maybe they'll stop coming after me. Her breath stopped. For a heartbeat, the world went utterly still. Is that what I am to you? She whispered. A danger you need gone. His eyes widened with regret the instant he heard himself. Clara, no, that ain't. But it was too late. The words struck where she was already bleeding. She stepped back again, hands shaking with hurt. Thank you for the shelter, for saving me that night. But I can't stay in a home built on silence. Malachi looked sick, haunted. Clara, don't go like this. But she was already turning away, boots crunching over frost as she walked into the growing dark. Josie ran to the door, small silhouette framed by lamplight. Clara? Clara, wait! Clara forced a smile through tears. Stay inside, sweetheart. Malachi's voice carried after her, deep and low, breaking in a way she had never heard. Clara, please, don't do this alone. She didn't look back. She couldn't. Because if she saw his face right now, full of regret and love he was too broken to say, she might crumble before she had a chance to breathe. And the night swallowed her steps as she disappeared from Reed Hollow Ranch, carrying a heart cracked clean through. The night chilled fast in the open country. Snow had begun to fall in thin, sharp flakes, stinging Clara's cheeks as she hurried down the narrow trail leading away from the ranch. Her breath came in ragged clouds. Her heart felt numb, split open by Malachi's half-truths and the words she wished she'd never heard. If you leave, maybe they'll stop coming after me. She pressed her lips together, fighting tears. She wasn't leaving to spite him. She just needed space to breathe, to think, to survive her own hurt. But the deeper she walked into the dark, the more the world grew too quiet. Not peaceful quiet. Predator quiet. Her boots crunched softly over frost-hardened snow. She wrapped her arms around herself for warmth. But the cold wasn't the thing raising goose flesh on her skin. A twig snapped. Clara froze. This land wasn't empty after sunset. She knew that. She'd experienced worse things than wolves and worse men than outlaws. But she'd hoped, just for one night, she could walk without fear. Evening, sweetheart. The voice drawled out of the darkness like oil spreading across water. A man stepped into view, scar dragging down the side of his cheek, breath steaming in the cold. Two others emerged behind him, shadows with rifles, and Clara's blood turned to ice. "We knew you'd wander," the scarred man grinned. "Prettiest bait we've had in a while." Clara's lungs seized. She stepped backward, straight into another man blocking the trail. "Easy now," he said, breath sour. "Don't need you breaking before we deliver you." Clara's heart slammed against her ribs. She opened her mouth to scream, but a gloved hand clamped over it, cutting the sound. "Boss'll pay double for bringing the girl back," someone muttered. She thrashed, kicked, clawed, anything to get free, but the scarred man only laughed. Oh, I remember those eyes. Her stomach dropped. "I saw him the day we cracked open that caravan near the ridge." He leaned close, breath hot against the cold air. "Never forget a face that begs." Clara's limbs went cold. Every memory she'd fought to bury surged up, choking her. She tried to wrench free, but the grip tightened. Then, a gunshot cracked the night apart. The man holding her jerked, dropping her as he stumbled backward. Another shot. Snow sprayed up beside them. "Let her go!" Malachi's voice thundered from the ridge above, raw and furious. Clara gasped, scrambling to her feet. Malachi charged down the incline, rifle blazing, fury burning through the falling snow. He'd come after her, despite everything she'd said, despite everything he'd done. The scarred man snarled, grabbing Clara by the arm and dragging her backward. "Ain't that sweet? The tracker come to fetch his girl." Malachi fired again, the bullet grazing the man's shoulder. He howled and shoved Clara aside to return fire. Gunshots split the night. Clara dove, behind a fallen log, heart hammering. Snowflakes blurred with sparks from gunfire. "Clara!" Malachi yelled. "Stay down!" But one of the outlaws swung wide, raising his pistol toward Malachi's back. Clara's breath hitched. A few feet away, half buried in snow, lay a short-barreled revolver, dropped by one of the men in the chaos. Her pulse roared in her ears. She remembered the caravan, being dragged, being sold, begging, no more. Clara lunged for the revolver, fingers numb as she wrapped both hands around the cold metal. She rose onto one knee, aimed, not gracefully, not expertly, but desperately. "Malachi!" she shouted. He spun just as the outlaw fired. Clara pulled the trigger. The recoil kicked her shoulder back, but the bullet struck true, slamming into the outlaw's arm. He shrieked, dropping his gun as he collapsed into the snow. Malachi's eyes snapped to her. Shock, fear, and something fierce flickering in them. But there was no time to speak. The scarred man tackled Malachi from behind, sending both men crashing into the snow. They grappled, rolling dangerously close to Clara. Malachi slammed his elbow back, breaking the outlaw's grip, but the man clawed for a knife. Clara acted before she could think. She rushed forward, swinging the heavy revolver down on the man's wrist. Bone cracked. He screamed, dropping the blade. Malachi seized the opening, pinning him hard against the ground. Breathing ragged, Malachi forced the man's hands behind his back with a strip of rope from his coat. It was over. Finally. It was over. Clara stood trembling, revolver slipping from her fingers into the snow. Her legs gave way, and she sank to her knees, gasping. Malachi knelt in front of her instantly. "Clara, Clara, are you hurt?" She shook her head, tears burning her eyes. I thought I could get far enough not to cause trouble." He cupped her face, thumbs brushing tears from her cheeks. "You think you're trouble." His voice cracked. "You're the only good thing that's walked onto my land in years." Her lip trembled. "You lied, Malachi. You kept things from me." "I know," he whispered, "and I'd give anything to undo that." They were both shaking, not from cold, but from everything that had almost happened. Clara stared at the outlaw groaning in the snow. "He said you led them to the caravan. To us." Malachi shut his eyes tight, jaw clenching. "I did. And I'll tell you everything. All of it. But not out here. And not standin' in the dark." He swallowed hard. "Please, come home." Clara held his gaze through the snowfall. The man who'd saved her, hurt her, fought for her, failed her, and still come running when she needed him most. Her voice was barely a whisper. "I don't know if I can trust you." Malachi nodded, pain flickering rawly. "Then let me earn it. From the ground up." The wind stirred. Snow fell gently around them. And Clara, exhausted, shaken, but alive because she fought, finally let him help her to her feet. For the first time, she wasn't just surviving. She was choosing. Sunday mornings in Bitter Creek were supposed to be quiet. Church bells, fresh bread, the low murmur of families heading to service. But this morning, every sound felt sharp. Clara rode next to Malachi in silence, her fingers tight around the reins. The outlaw they captured was tied to Malachi's spare horse, wrists and ankles bound so tight he could barely shift. Josie rode in the wagon behind them, eyes wide with fear, but trusting Malachi the way a child trusts solid earth. The townsfolk noticed the moment they crossed the main street. Curtains lifted, heads turned, murmurs rippled, soft at first, then rising like storm winds. Clara's chest tightened. All these eyes, all this judgment. For him, and maybe for her too. Malachi kept his face steady, unreadable, but Clara could see the tension in his jaw. Every step closer to the churchyard felt like stepping into a fire. He stopped the horse in front of the church steps, then dragged the outlaw down, shoving him hard to the ground. The man spat blood. "He ain't no hero," he sneered, jabbing his chin at Malachi. "This man used to ride with us. Don't let him fool you." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Sheriff Whitlow emerged, his badge glinting in the light. Crowell stood beside him, arms folded, wearing a smirk, dripping with poison. "Well, look here," Crowell drawled. "Reed's brought us a gift, and some entertainment." Malachi didn't look at them. His voice carried strong and steady as he addressed the townsfolk. "This man and his boys tried to take a woman last night. Tried to kill her." He nodded toward Clara. "And I brought him here so all of you know what's been lurking on your trails." Whitlow laughed, mean and mocking. "Funny hearing that from you. A tracker who used to deliver those same folks straight to us. Clara's stomach twisted. Crowell stepped forward, tilting his hat. Tell him, Reed. Tell him how you helped us hunt down caravans and runners. How many you led right into our hands. The crowd murmured. Fear, anger, disbelief. Malachi's hands clenched at his sides. Clara felt the air tighten. Here it was. The moment he could run from. Lie through. Or meet head-on. He chose head-on. His voice broke the hush with a weight that shook Clara to her bones. I did it! Gasps erupted, some shocked, some triumphant. I worked for Whitlow, for Crowell, for their whole damn ring, Malachi said, breath unsteady. I tracked caravans. I led hunts. I did things that'll sit on my conscience till the day I die. The confession landed heavy, cutting through the cold morning air. Clara's breath left her in one painful rush. Hearing it aloud was different than reading it on a page. It carved into her. Malachi lifted his chin, eyes scanning the crowd. Not pleading, not defiant, just honest. I never did it for them. I did it to keep Josie alive. His voice roughened. They killed my sister. Took her, trying to escape. I had a baby in my arms, and no way to protect her, but to make those men believe I was one of them. Whitlow scoffed. So now you want pity. Malachi's eyes darkened. I'm not asking for pity. I'm owning what I did. He took a slow breath. And I'm telling all of you, those men ain't done. They want Clara. They want others. And if you keep pretending it ain't happening under your noses, more blood's gonna spill in this town. The outlaw on the ground snarled. You think they'll believe you? You're filth, a turncoat, a dog that bit his own pack. Malachi didn't even look at him, but Clara noticed something. A tremor in his fingers, a tightness in his throat. This confession wasn't just public. It was punishment. A wound he knew he deserved. And yet, he still stood tall. Whitlow stepped down the church steps, pointing accusingly at Clara. What's she doing by your side, Reed? Part of your redemption story? Clara stiffened, heart pounding as all eyes swung to her. Malachi opened his mouth, maybe to defend her. But Clara spoke first, voice trembling but strong. I stand here because this man saved my life last night, and because he's the only one who has taken responsibility for his sins. The crowd stirred. Clara took a shaky breath. I don't forgive him. Not today. Maybe not ever. But I see a man who's already paid for what he did. Every day he breathes. A whisper rippled through the bystanders. Malachi's eyes flickered. Hope, pain, gratitude, all tangled together. Crowell barked a laugh. Hear that? Even the girl he saved don't forgive him. Clara met his gaze with ice. I'm standing by him today. That's more than any of you cowards ever did for the victims you ignored. The reaction was instant. Some recoiled. Some straightened. Some looked ashamed. Whitlow opened his mouth to speak. But the church doors swung open, and old Pastor Hargreaves stepped out, leaning on his cane. "Enough," the old man rasped, his voice carried with unexpected force. "I've seen this man bring supplies to widows without taking credit. I've seen him hide families in his home when riders came looking. I've seen him do more good in 5 years than some of y'all done in your whole lives." Crowell's smirk faltered. Pastor Hargreaves raised a trembling hand. "Reed has sinned, but he has repented in deed, not word, and that counts for something in the eyes of God." Silence swallowed the square. Clara's heart thudded. Malachi stared at the ground, overwhelmed by the weight of unexpected mercy. The outlaw snarled, struggling in the dirt. "You all forgettin' he helped us? He delivered bodies to y'all's doorstep." Pastor Hargreaves leaned on his cane. "And now he's delivered you." A murmur, louder this time. Approval, support, courage beginning to spark. Clara's breath shook. Something inside her shifted. Not forgiveness, not yet, but a loosening, a softening. Malachi lifted his eyes to hers, broken, hopeful, terrified. And Clara stayed standing next to him. She didn't walk away. Not this time. For a long, breathless moment, Bitter Creek stood frozen, caught between its old fears and something new rising in the cold morning air. Pastor Hargreaves stepped off the church porch with a steadiness that defied his age, his cane tapping sharply against the wooden steps. Whitlow bristled. "Pastor, this ain't your business." The old man's eyes narrowed. "When blood is shed on my doorstep, Sheriff, it becomes my business." His weathered voice rang through the square. "And when justice is twisted by the hands paid to uphold it, God himself takes interest." A ripple went through the gathered townsfolk. Crowell clicked his tongue. "Y'all gonna listen to this relic?" But the crowd wasn't looking at Crowell anymore. They were looking at Pastor Hargreaves and at Malachi. A rancher's wife stepped forward, clutching her shawl. "Pastor, are you saying he really sheltered families? I heard rumors." Hargreaves nodded firmly. "Rumors born from truth. Reed harbored a woman and her 2 boys for nearly a month, fed them, helped them get safe passage, didn't ask for coin or thanks." More murmurs. A tall farmhand scratched his beard, frowning. "Sheriff, didn't you say nobody was running from those caravans? That it was all lies?" Whitlow stiffened. "Watch your tongue." But another man, this one older, voice trembling, spoke up. "My niece was in one of them caravans. Sheriff said she chose that life, but I knew he lied." His eyes turned to Malachi. "And you helped her?" Malachi's voice was quiet but steady. "I tried. I swear I tried." The old man wiped at his eyes. "God bless you, son." A shock went through the crowd. Whitlow's face darkened, sensing the turning tide. This town ain't gonna swallow Reed's sob story just 'cause a few soft hearts. Soft hearts? Clara cut in sharply. Every head turned. She stepped forward, voice carrying a painful, trembling strength. You call people soft for wanting the truth? For wanting decency? Her eyes flashed. You knew what was happening to us. You let it happen. Because you were part of it. Whitlow's hand hovered near his revolver. Watch yourself, girl. But Crowell held out an arm, stopping him, smirking. Let her talk. Seems she likes defendin' her tracker friend. Clara's voice trembled, not with fear, but with conviction. I'm not defending his past. I'm standing with the man he is now, a man who risks everything to make things right. Then she turned to Malachi. I haven't forgiven you, but I see you fighting your own darkness every day, and that matters. Malachi's lips parted. Not quite a smile, not quite grief, something raw and trembling between the two. Another voice rose from the crowd, this time from Mrs. Harper, the general store owner. I seen Reed patch up folks free of charge, helped my husband when he broke his leg. Fed us for weeks, she pointed at Whitlow. You never did a thing but sneer. Someone else added, Reed stopped a stagecoach robbery near Willow Pass. Another, helped me bury my father when nobody else came. The murmurs grew, swelling into a wave. One by one, the townsfolk stepped forward, offering pieces of truth that had long been whispered, but never spoken aloud. Hargreaves lifted his cane. This man has sinned, but he has also saved. And redemption is measured in deeds, not the wagging of tongues. Whitlow's face twisted. Pastor, you're overstepping. No, Hargreaves said. You are. The crowd gasped as the old pastor reached forward and with surprising strength hooked his cane beneath Whitlow's badge, lifting it off and letting it fall to the dirt. Whitlow froze. Crowell's smirk shattered. Bitter Creek, the pastor proclaimed, deserves lawmen who serve justice, not their own pockets. A rumble of agreement rolled through the square. People stepped forward, not timidly, but with purpose, forming a barrier between Malachi and the two corrupt men. Clara felt something loosen inside her chest. Not forgiveness, not yet, but hope. A fragile, flickering hope that maybe she wasn't alone in believing people could change. Malachi stood stiffly, like he didn't deserve any of it. His hands shook at his sides. His voice cracked when he finally spoke. I don't want thanks. I want to set things right. Clara stepped to his side, not touching, but close enough that the warmth of her presence steadied him, close enough that everyone saw her choose her place. Crowell glared at them, jaw ticking. This ain't over. No, Clara said softly. It's just beginning. And the town, hesitant at first, nodded. Whitlow backed away, eyes darting nervously as the outlaw on the ground laughed bitterly. Look at that, Reed. World's changed on you. Malachi didn't look down. For the first time in years, he lifted his head high. He met Clara's eyes, and she saw, beneath all the guilt, all the pain, a man finally able to breathe. For the first time, too, she felt something warm begin to knit itself inside her. Not wholeness, not healing, but the beginning of heal. The storm of accusations and shouting finally broke apart by late afternoon. The outlaw was hauled into custody by volunteers, not Sheriff Whitlow, and Crowell slithered away down an alley, stripped of whatever power he once thought he had. Bitter Creek was left shaken, dust rising in quiet drifts as people scattered back to their homes. Malachi stood in the center of the street, like a man who had run too far, too fast. Clara watched him from the steps of the church, hands trembling at her sides. She didn't know whether her feet belonged closer to him or farther away. He made the choice for her. Malachi approached slowly, every step seeming to require permission. "Clara," he said when he stopped a few feet away, "I gotta say something, and I don't expect an answer back." "I'm listening," she whispered. He took a breath, eyes unsteady, so unlike the man who faced down outlaws and angry townsfolk without blinking. "I ain't asking you to forget what I did. Ain't asking you to give it either. I want you to have your freedom back. For real. If you want to leave Reed Hollow, I'll help you pack. I won't stand in your way again." The words hit her harder than any threat ever had. Freedom, the thing she had fought for, prayed for. Hearing him offer it with no strings, no guilt, just truth, hurt in a way she didn't expect. "Malachi," she said softly, "I don't want to run. Not from the truth. Not from you, but I don't know how to stay either." A flicker of hope lit his eyes. Small, fragile, almost frightened. "Then maybe we learn together." Before either could speak again, a pair of small boots came thundering between them. Josie planted herself in front of them, hands on her hips. "If the two of you mess this up after all that hollerin' today," she warned, "I'm telling Pastor Hargreaves to marry you by force." Clara blinked. Malachi choked. Josie jabbed a finger at him. "You two are the only grown-ups who make me feel safe. If you break up, I'm running away with the marshals. You'll never see me again." Clara burst into unexpected laughter. Malachi scrubbed a hand over his face, half mortified, half grateful. Clara knelt and gathered the feisty girl close. "We're not leaving you, sweetheart." Josie nodded firmly. "Good, 'cause you're both stubborn as church mules." Clara met Malachi's eyes over her head. A small, fragile smile passed between them. A truce. A possibility. They returned to Reed Hollow Ranch in quiet, but it wasn't the heavy silence of fear. It felt gentler. Healing. Like the land itself was waiting to see what came next. Near the house, Malachi paused beside the porch and pointed to the rusted iron emblem hanging on the wall. A broken chain link. Clara touched it softly. "Your sister's." He nodded. "She carved it. Said it meant freedom earned, not given. After she died, I kept it here to remind me what I failed to protect, and what I had to fight for next." Clara felt her chest tighten. "You fought alone a long time." His voice roughened. "I don't want to fight alone anymore." Something inside her cracked open. She brushed her fingers against his hand on the wood. He didn't pull away. "Then don't," she whispered. The moment held, gentle, steady, full of unspoken hurt and hope. Then Malachi cleared his throat awkwardly. fixed the porch rail and the roof panel, and Joe swept the kitchen. Josie shouted from inside, "No, I didn't!" Clara laughed, and they stepped into the house together. Evening light stretched long across the floorboards. Dust floated like tiny confetti. Clara made supper with hands still trembling, but steady where it mattered. Malachi chopped wood. Josie fed crumbs to the barn cat. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't healed. But it was beginning. After supper, Malachi wiped the table and asked quietly, "Would you stay tonight?" She knew he didn't mean it the way it sounded. He meant trust, safety, choosing not to run anymore. "Yes," she said. Josie cheered loud enough to stir the dead. Malachi